Looks like our guests have arrived. Shall we welcome them?
Each passing day, a proprietor of a human drinking establishment would clandestinely provide sustenance to an ancient extraterrestrial until two large vehicles arrived unannounced at his dwelling. The atmosphere within the rusty Anchor Tavern carried the scent of exotic alien seasonings, inexpensive spirits, and pervasive despair. Jake Morgan methodically polished the worn oak counter with a piece of fabric that had clearly seen better eras. Similar to every other facet of this neglected outpost on Praxis 9, the subdued illumination cast elongated shadows throughout the premises, obscuring the considerable wear and tear that accompanied the operation of the sole human-run establishment in the most impoverished sector of an alien metropolis. Jake's robust forearms tensed as he scrubbed a particularly stubborn blemish. At 32 years of age, he still possessed the physique that had served him effectively during his tenure with the Earth Defense Force. Auburn hair fell across his brow as he worked, and he habitually brushed it back with the dorsal side of his hand. Another uneventful evening, he murmured to himself, observing the sparsely populated establishment. 3 Vorxilian merchants were huddled in a secluded booth, their diaphanous skin emitting a faint luminescence as they conversed in hushed tones. A lone Draconid occupied a stool at the far extremity of the bar, slowly imbibing what passed for alcoholic beverage in this galactic region. Jake consulted his timepiece. 2100 hours. The nightly curfew for non-natives would commence shortly. Being the sole human resident on the entire planet rendered him a perpetual outsider despite his nearly 5-year residency. The local authorities, particularly the Praxian Enforcement Division with their recognizable obsidian and amethyst armored suits, ensured he remained acutely aware of his status. A sharp wind howled outside as the temperature abruptly plummeted. Praxis 9's volatile atmospheric conditions were manifesting once more. Jake moved towards the window, observing as the few remaining pedestrians hastened their steps to seek refuge. It was at this moment that he noticed him. An elderly Praxian was slumped against the tavern's exterior wall, racked by tremors. The aged alien's amethyst epidermis had faded to a pallid lavender, and his formerly upright posture was now bowed with advanced age and hardship. What immediately drew Jake's attention was the dilapidated military regalia the elder wore, marred by numerous abrasions and frayed sections that testified to conflicts long concluded. Jake was acutely aware of the repercussions. The PED had already issued him 3 stern warnings regarding harboring undesirables. Their precise admonitions echoed in his mind. There will be no further transgressions, human. Yet, something in the old Praxian's inherent dignity, even in his present state, ignited a spark within Jake. Without a moment's hesitation, he unlocked the portal and stepped out into the frigid air. "Hello," Jake called softly. "It's dropping below freezing. Come inside." The elderly Praxian raised his gaze, 4 weary ocular organs blinking in surprise. "Your benevolence is unexpected," he rasped, his translation device emitting a crackle of interference. "Indeed. Well, I am replete with surprises." Jake assisted the alien to his feet. "I have sustenance and something warm to drink." Once inside, Jake secured the entrance and guided the elder to a table adjacent to the kitchen. The few remaining patrons cast fleeting glances but swiftly resumed their individual pursuits. Jake retreated into the culinary area and reappeared with a steaming bowl of hearty stew and a substantial chalice of his distinctive homemade brew, a concoction that, remarkably, managed to satisfy a wide spectrum of alien palates. "Consume this," Jake instructed, placing the meal before him. "It is not elaborate, but it is warm." The elderly Praxian's appendages quivered as he lifted the utensil. "I have not partaken of a proper meal in some duration," he admitted, taking a cautious draught. His eyes widened. "This is remarkably palatable," Jake commented with a smile. "An old Earth recipe. From my mother." As the elder ate, Jake returned to his post behind the counter, maintaining vigilance over the entrance. The curfew was now in effect, and PED patrols would soon commence their rounds. The Draconid patron at the bar emitted a soft hiss, drawing Jake's notice. "They are approaching," he warned, his forked tongue flicking nervously. Jake's heart sank as he detected the unmistakable resonance of PED vehicles outside. Through the frosted pane, he discerned the outlines of 2 obsidian SUVs drawing up to the tavern, The remaining clientele swiftly settled their accounts and departed through the rear egress, leaving only Jake and the elder Praxian. "You ought to depart," Jake urged the elder, but it was too late. The portal was violently forced inward with a resounding impact that dislodged dust from the ceiling. A PED agent barged in, his imposing armor glinting under the tavern's illumination, his countenance concealed by an unfeatured visor. Behind him, 2 additional officers assumed positions at the entryway. "We issued a warning, human," the lead agent intoned, his voice a cold, mechanical rasp filtered through the mask. There would be no further leniency. Jake remained resolute, his hands flat upon the counter. "I am freezing to death." "That is not our concern," the agent retorted, reaching for the restraint secured to his belt. "Your establishment is now impounded, and you will be processed for immediate repatriation." The elderly Praxian continued his meal, seemingly unperturbed by the escalating tension. Then, without diverting his attention from his food, he spoke in a quiet yet distinct tone. "I would strongly advise you to reconsider your present course of action." The lead agent froze, his hand suspended inches from his restraints. Slowly, he pivoted towards the elder. "Identify yourself," he commanded. However, a newfound apprehension permeated his voice. The elderly Praxian finally raised his head, and Jake was taken aback by the sudden acuity in those ancient eyes. "I suspect you are already well aware of my identity, Agent Krell," the elder stated, addressing the agent by name, despite the absence of any identifying insignia on his uniform. "And I am confident your superiors would be exceedingly interested in learning about your recent activities in the Nye District." The agent involuntarily recoiled, his posture stiffening with an emotion Jake recognized as apprehension. Without further discourse, he gestured to his associates, and they withdrew from the tavern with the same celerity with which they had arrived. Jake stared at the elder in utter bewilderment. What in the blazes just transpired? The elderly Praxian offered a simple smile, resuming his repast. "At times, young man, acts of kindness are returned in the most unexpected fashion." Outside, the engines of the PED vehicles roared to life, and they vanished into the night, leaving Jake grappling with a multitude of unanswered questions and the burgeoning certainty that his existence was poised for profound alteration. The morning following the confrontation, Jake was occupied with replenishing the bar's stock when a firm rapping echoed through the deserted establishment. His hand instinctively moved towards the pulse pistol concealed beneath the counter before he called out, "We are currently closed." "I believe we have matters that require discussion, Mr. Morgan," came the familiar voice of the elderly Praxian. Jake relaxed somewhat and proceeded to unlock the portal. The aged alien stood there, appearing considerably more composed than he had the preceding evening. In the daylight, Jake observed the insignia emblazoned on his worn armor, faded but unmistakable markings denoting a high military rank. "You know my designation," Jake remarked, stepping aside to permit his entry. "It appears you possess considerable knowledge of my affairs, yet I am unaware of how to address you." The elder's brow furrowed with an expression Jake recognized as the Praxian equivalent of mirth. General Thorenvors, retired, though currently disavowed, might be the appellation the prevailing administration would prefer. Jake emitted a low whistle. "A general? It is no wonder those PED enforcers retreated." He gestured towards a table. "Coffee? It is genuine Earth origin. It cost me a considerable sum to import." "I have never partaken of it," Thorin conceded, settling into a chair with a slight sigh. "However, I am amenable to experiencing this human custom." As Jake prepared the coffee, Thorin surveyed the tavern with a novel degree of interest. "You have established quite a haven here, Mr. Morgan. A fragment of Earth amidst our domain." "Jake, if you please," he corrected, returning with 2 steaming mugs. "And it is humble, but it is my home now." Thorin accepted the mug, inhaling the aroma cautiously before taking a tentative sip. His eyes widened in surprise. "Remarkable complexity, bitter yet inexplicably comforting. Is that humanity in essence?" Jake chuckled. "So, General, what compels your return to my modest establishment? I doubt it is solely my coffee." Thorin placed his mug down, his demeanor shifting to one of seriousness. "I require your assistance, Jake, and in exchange, I can extend to you a measure of protection. Something you clearly necessitate if you intend to continue your philanthropic endeavors? I am attending, Jake confirmed. My daughter, Thorin began, his voice softening. Theon. We have not conversed in nearly a decade. Following my fall from favor, she distanced herself, forging her own professional path within the government. She now holds the position of Deputy Minister of Colonial Affairs. Jake let out a soft whistle. That is a significant ascent. Indeed. And it necessitated the severance of all connections with her disavowed father. Thorin's four eyes blinked with an expression Jake identified as sorrow. However, recent circumstances have rendered reconciliation imperative. There are forces at play within our government. Pernicious ideologies are gaining traction. And you believe she will heed your counsel now? Jake inquired. Thorin shook his head. Not mine, but perhaps yours. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. Me? Why would a deputy minister grant any credence to the words of some human barkeep? Because you are human, Jake, Thorin stated plainly. Vyra has always held a fascination for your species. She pursued studies of Earth culture at the Galactic Academy. And because you aided me, an act of compassion that would undoubtedly impress her greatly. Jake leaned back in his chair, contemplating. So, I'm expected to do what? March into the Colonial Affairs Ministry and request an audience with the Deputy Minister? Not quite so direct, Thorne responded with a faint smile. Vyra frequents the Celestial Gardens for her midday repast. It is a public venue, albeit exclusive. With my credentials, I can secure your admission. The remainder would depend on your, shall we say, human charm. Jake ran a hand through his hair, weighing the available options. The protection afforded by a former general might deter the PED, but entanglement in Praxian politics seemed fraught with peril at best, and suicidal at worst. What precisely are these pernicious ideologies you alluded to? Thorne's expression darkened. There exists a burgeoning faction within our administration advocating for complete disengagement from other sentient species, particularly humans. They perceive Earth's rapid expansion as a significant threat. Some are actively pursuing more definitive resolutions to what they term the human question. A shiver traced its way down Jake's spine. And your daughter? Vyra possesses considerable influence. She could help moderate these viewpoints, foster connections rather than divisions, but she requires an understanding of the ramifications and the intrinsic value of collaborative efforts. Jake tapped his fingers rhythmically on the table. And should I undertake this endeavor for you, as I stated, protection, but also... Thorne reached into a concealed compartment within his armor and produced a small, luminous data crystal. Information pertaining to other humans on Praxis 9. Jake's heart leaped into his throat. What? That is impossible. I am the sole individual. Thorin's eyes glinted. Are you entirely certain of that, Mr. Morgan? Our world is replete with shadows and secrets. Before Jake could offer a reply, the tavern's communication panel chimed, signaling an incoming transmission. Jake excused himself and moved to the counter to examine it. The screen displayed a formal notification. By decree of the Ministry of Colonial Affairs, all non-citizen business proprietors are mandated to attend a regulatory briefing tomorrow at 1300 hours. Attendance is compulsory. Jake glanced back at Theron, who appeared equally surprised. It seems your daughter may be seeking me out after all. Theron rose from his chair, suddenly exuding the bearing of the commanding general he once was. Then we have work to accomplish, Mr. Morgan. You will need to make a considerable impression. As the general moved towards the exit, Jake called out after him. You still have not explained why she would heed my counsel over her own father's. Thorin paused, his hand on the portal. Because, Jake Morgan, at times it requires an outsider to perceive the truth about ourselves. And humans, he offered a faint smile. Humans possess an uncanny aptitude for achieving precisely that. The Ministry of Colonial Affairs loomed over the capital district like a resplendent monument to Praxian dominance, all sharp angles and polished surfaces that reflected the pale azure sun of Praxis 9. Jake felt a distinct sense of displacement as he approached the edifice. Clad in his cleanest attire, a dark azure shirt that strained slightly across his broad shoulders and black trousers that had seen better days but were at least free of blemishes. Security was exceptionally stringent. 4 PED officers stood sentinel at the entrance, their distinctive amethyst and obsidian armor gleaming. Jake presented his non-citizen identification card along with the meeting summons, bracing himself for potential complications. To his astonishment, one of the officers merely nodded and directed him towards the 11th floor. "Conference room Delta. Do not stray, human." The elevator car was densely packed with a variety of alien species, business proprietors from across the metropolis, all appearing equally ill at ease. A Merlian merchant, adorned with iridescent scales, offered a respectful nod to Jake, the renowned human proprietor. "We have heard," he whispered. "Word of your confrontation with the PED has circulated." Jake winced. "Splendid. Just what I require. A reputation." The Merlian scales rippled with amusement. In these times, a human who stands firm is a refreshing sight. The elevator doors opened into a reception area where attendants directed visitors to their designated assembly chambers. Jake followed the signage towards Conference Room Delta, finding it already half occupied by non-citizens. He selected a seat towards the rear, his gaze scanning the room for any indication of Theron or his daughter. His wait was not prolonged. A side portal opened, admitting 3 Praxian officials. 2 were clearly advisors, carrying data slates and attired in the standard bureaucratic uniforms. However, it was the 3rd individual who commanded Jake's attention. Deputy Minister Vyra Vors moved with the assured grace of one destined for authority. Her amethyst skin was several shades lighter than her father's, almost lavender, and seemed to possess a subtle luminescence under the room's lighting. Unlike most Praxian females, who favored flowing vestments, she wore a tailored ensemble that accentuated her slender yet athletic physique. Her 4 ocular organs, a deep violet bordering on indigo, surveyed the assembly with cool professionalism. Those eyes alighted upon Jake almost immediately, widening slightly in what might have been surprise before her expression reverted to a state of neutral detachment. "Welcome," she commenced, her voice clear and measured. "I appreciate your adherence to this mandatory briefing. Recent policy adjustments necessitate our attention." What ensued was 30 minutes of bureaucratic tedium, novel tax regulations, import restrictions, and licensing prerequisites. Jake found his concentration wavering until he registered the phrase, "human commodities." Yet, an immediate directive mandates that all establishments serving or dispensing human food, beverages, or entertainment must obtain special certification. This is for the welfare of our citizens, as human consumables may induce unforeseen reactions in Praxian physiology, Vyra stated. A Draconid merchant raised a clawed appendage. "Deputy Minister, these new regulations will result in the financial ruin of half the businesses present." Her expression remained impassive. "The safety of our citizens is of paramount importance. However, I acknowledge your concerns. Those who wish to discuss specific hardships may schedule individual consultations with my office." Her eyes briefly flickered towards Jake. "This concludes our briefing. My assistant will distribute documentation packets as you depart. I thank you for your cooperation." As the assembly began to disperse, Jake remained seated, recalling Theron's instructions. When only a few stragglers lingered, Vyra approached him directly. "Mr. Morgan," she stated, her voice now softer, less formal. "A moment of your time." Jake rose, suddenly conscious of their disparity in stature. He towered over her by at least a foot. "Deputy Minister?" "My office," she said succinctly, gesturing towards the side portal through which she had entered. Her office was surprisingly understated, prioritizing functionality over ostentation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic vista of the capital, yet the furnishings were simple, and the walls remained unadorned, save for her credentials. "So," she said, taking her place behind her desk, "you are the human who has been causing such a stir." Jake remained standing, arms crossed. "I was unaware that providing sustenance to the hungry was considered causing a stir." A fleeting expression of amusement crossed her features. Direct, refreshing. After a day of political equivocation, she studied him openly. "You know my father." It was not a question. Jake nodded. "General Vors found his way to my tavern, and you assisted him, notwithstanding the inherent risks." She leaned forward slightly. "Why?" "Because it was cold, and he was hungry," Jake replied simply. "It should not matter what species you are. Basic decency ought not to be considered a revolutionary act." Vyra's 4 ocular organs blinked with what Jake recognized as the Praxian equivalent of surprise. "Fascinating," You humans truly operate on such elemental principles. We refer to it as compassion. We call it dangerous naivete, she countered, though without any hint of malice. Though I must admit, there is something compelling about it. She rose and moved towards a small cabinet, retrieving 2 glasses and a bottle containing an amber liquid. Earth whiskey, technically contraband, but I find it beneficial for understanding other cultures. Jake accepted the offered glass, their fingertips brushing momentarily. A subtle current seemed to pass between them, and Vera withdrew her hand, perhaps a fraction too quickly. My father wishes to reconcile, she stated abruptly, taking a sip of whiskey. He sent you as his envoy. Jake did not bother to deny it. He harbors concerns regarding certain political movements in which you might possess the capacity to exert influence. Vira's expression hardened. Politics is considerably more intricate than serving beverages to strangers, Mr. Morgan. Jake, he corrected, and I possess a more profound understanding of complex situations than you might assume. 5 years on a planet that largely harbors animosity towards my species has proven to be quite the education. Her eyes narrowed, yet a flicker of curiosity was discernible. And still, you remain. Why? Jake shrugged. Earth no longer felt like home after the conflict, and someone must demonstrate to the Praxians that humans are not the monstrosities your propaganda depicts us as. One establishment at a time? She inquired, a hint of playful teasing in her voice. 1 meal at a time, he corrected, finishing his whiskey. The alcohol left a pleasant burning sensation, warming his chest. Your father misses you, Vira, and he is apprehensive about the trajectory Praxis is taking. She moved closer, observing him with undisguised fascination. You are either remarkably courageous or exceedingly imprudent to address a government official so forthrightly. I have been labeled worse, Jake responded, a smile suddenly appearing as he realized how close she was standing. Her fragrance was subtle, yet intoxicating, reminiscent of cinnamon and ozone. I find humans to be perplexing, she admitted, her voice softening. Your kind acts on impulse, on emotion. Yet you have achieved so much. Perhaps because of that. Not in spite of it, Jake suggested. Vira's hand reached up, hovering near his face as if contemplating touch, but she hesitated. I have studied your species extensively, academically, but I have never... The communication panel on her desk chimed insistently. Vira blinked, the moment disrupted, and stepped back to answer it. Deputy Minister, Chief of Security Morton requests your immediate presence concerning the human situation, came a clipped voice. Inform him, she replied, that I shall be there shortly. She then turned back to Jake. It appears our discussion must be deferred to another occasion. Jake nodded, placing his glass down. Your father will be disappointed. Tell him, she began, then paused. Tell him I will consider his concerns. And perhaps, she added, I would be inclined to visit your tavern. For research purposes, naturally. Naturally? Jake replied, unable to suppress a smile. The rusty anchor extends its welcome to all researchers. As he turned to depart, Vira called after him. Mr. Morgan, Jake, these new regulations, they are not my doing. How? Be cautious. Their gazes met one final time, and Jake perceived something beyond professional obligation in her eyes, something that caused his pulse to quicken as he stepped back into the bustling quarter. Jake returned to the rusty anchor to discover utter pandemonium. 3 PED officers in their signature obsidian and amethyst armor were systematically dismantling his bar, while a 4th observed the destruction with evident satisfaction. Bottles of fermented earth nectar lay smashed across the ground, with overturned furnishings and a vintage music machine, which had taken Jake 2 years to procure, reduced to fragments. What in the galaxy is this mess? Jake demanded, striding through the entrance. The officer in charge spun around, and Jake immediately recognized him. Agent Krell, the very individual who had questioned him previously regarding Theron. An inspection, Krell stated, his tone laced with feigned politeness. New directives mandate a comprehensive review of all human sustenance, for the safety of the populace. Jake's fists clenched at his sides. You have no authority to do this. We possess every right, Krell interjected, presenting a document that appeared official, bearing the signature of Security Chief Morton himself. Perhaps you should have considered the ramifications before associating with Deputy Minister Vors. So that was the crux of it. News of his private meeting with Vyra had evidently reached unwelcome ears. Jake surveyed the destruction, mentally tallying the immense cost. A significant portion of his stock was ruined, and replacing the equipment would take months, assuming he could even afford it. "You've made your point," Jake declared, forcing his voice to remain even. "Now, I suggest you depart." Krell advanced, his masked face mere inches from Jake's. "The inspection is not concluded. We still require access to the kitchen and your private living quarters upstairs." "You require a separate authorization for my personal dwelling," Jake countered, recalling the legal protocols drilled into all Earth expatriates. Krell's posture stiffened. "Do not provoke me, human. A single word from me and your operational license will be permanently rescinded." The tense stalemate was broken by the arrival of General Thorin, who entered the establishment with the innate confidence of someone accustomed to command. Despite his seasoned appearance, the gravitas of his presence was undeniable. "Agent Krell," Thorin stated calmly, "I believe you have overstepped your designated jurisdiction." Krell whirled around. "General Vors, this is a sanctioned operation. Your intervention is unwarranted." Thorin completed his thought, revealing a small holographic insignia. "As a special consultant to the Oversight Committee, I have the mandate to suspend any operation I deem excessive." The other officers ceased their destructive actions, observing the unfolding confrontation with apparent apprehension. "This human is concealing illicit terrestrial substances," Krell insisted. "Then confiscate them appropriately, documenting each item as mandated by law," Thorin retorted. "Or shall I escalate this matter to Committee Chairman Dren regarding your current methods?" Krell's mask obscured his expression, but his body language clearly conveyed his displeasure. After a moment of charged silence, he signaled his subordinates. "We are concluded here for the present." As they egressed, he paused at the threshold. "This is far from over, human. Not by a considerable margin." Once they had departed, Jake commenced the task of righting the overturned furniture. "Impeccable timing, General. Though I'm uncertain if you've just salvaged my establishment or placed an even larger target upon my back." Thorin assisted him in lifting a heavy table. "Both, I suspect. Did you converse with Vyra?" "I did. She is contemplating your concerns." Vyra mentioned visiting the establishment. Thorin's 4 eyes widened. "That is unexpected, and potentially advantageous." Jake was about to respond when the door opened once more. Both men tensed, anticipating Krell's return, only to find Vyra standing in the entryway, surveying the devastation with evident astonishment. "What transpired here?" she inquired, stepping inside and allowing the door to close behind her. "Your new regulations in practice," Jake replied, unable to mask the bitterness in his tone. "Apparently, human spirits pose a grave peril to public well-being." Vyra's expression darkened. This was not sanctioned. Not in this manner. She turned to her father, their gazes meeting for the first time in years. "Father," Vyra acknowledged, "you appear well." An awkward silence descended, pregnant with unspoken history. Finally, Vyra redirected her attention to Jake. "I came to provide a warning. Security Chief Morton has initiated surveillance upon you. He suspects you of clandestine activities, feeding the needy, conversing with governmental representatives." Jake inquired, sweeping broken glass into a pile. "Being human," she corrected softly. "Morton is the driving force behind the isolationist agenda. He perceives Earth's expansion as an existential threat to Praxian sovereignty." Jake emitted a humorless laugh. "I am a solitary individual operating a small establishment in the most impoverished sector of this planet. A formidable threat indeed." "You underestimate your influence," Vyra stated, moving closer. "Word of your defiance has circulated. You have become an emblem for the disenfranchised, proof that the established order can be challenged." "I never intended to challenge anything," Jake protested. "My sole desire was to serve refreshments and assist those in need." "The most impactful revolutions often originate from the simplest gestures of compassion," the general observed. Vyra's gaze remained fixed upon Jake, her 4 eyes scrutinizing him with an intensity that quickened his pulse. "Morton intends to apprehend both of you this evening. The charges are already prepared. Sedition, conspiracy, illicit distribution of regulated substances. Then we must depart, Thoran urged. And go where? Jake asked. This is my home. My entire existence is situated here. Vyra stepped even nearer, her hand brushing against Jake's arm. My private residence. It is secure, and Morton would not dare act against me without irrefutable proof. The contact of her fingers against his skin sent an unexpected jolt through Jake's body. Their eyes met, and he perceived something beyond professional obligation in her look. A warmth, an interest that mirrored his own burgeoning attraction. Your career, Jake began, is already at risk. Or, she finished for him, I have been questioning Morton's policies too openly. He is actively seeking avenues to discredit me. The general observed this exchange with a blend of surprise and knowing amusement. I can secure my own refuge, he stated. Veteran soldiers possess contingency plans. However, Jake should accept your offer, Vyra. Outside, the unmistakable drone of official vehicles grew louder. Time was rapidly diminishing. Pack what you require, Vyra instructed, her hand still resting on Jake's arm. My transport is situated in the rear alleyway. As Jake hastily gathered essentials from his upstairs dwelling, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, disheveled, tense, yet somehow more vibrantly alive than he had felt in years. This was hardly the trajectory he had envisioned for his day when he had donned his most presentable attire for the ministerial rendezvous. Upon his return downstairs, Thoran had vanished, and Vera stood alone in the epicenter of the ravaged bar. He departed through the rear, she explained. We shall reconvene tomorrow at a secure locale. Jake nodded, casting one last look at the rusted anchor, his residence and livelihood for 5 years, now reduced to rubble. I trust you comprehend the implications of your actions, he said quietly. Vera's expression softened, and she reached up to gently touch his face. I seldom act without meticulous deliberation, Jake Morgan. However, encountering you, she hesitated, searching for appropriate words, has prompted me to reevaluate many convictions I once held as absolute truths. The sound of footsteps on the street outside propelled them into motion. They slipped out the rear exit just as the front entrance was violently forced open, vanishing into the encroaching twilight of Practice 9's brief evening. Vyra's private dwelling was nothing akin to what Jake had envisioned. Rather than the ostentatious mansion befitting a high-ranking government official, it was a modest apartment within a secure complex on the city's periphery. Clean architectural lines, sparse furnishings, and expansive windows offering panoramic views of the capital's glittering cityscape bestowed upon it an understated elegance. Not what you anticipated, Vyra inquired, noting his surprise as she secured the door behind them. Jake set down a small duffel containing his belongings. I had presumed deputy ministers resided in palaces. Some do, she admitted, activating the apartment's security protocols. I prefer unpretentiousness and anonymity. She moved to a concealed wall panel, revealing a sophisticated communication apparatus. We must contact my father. If Morton is initiating action against you, he is likely targeting Thoran as well. As Vyra manipulated the controls, Jake wandered to her workstation, where a holographic display presented numerous files bearing governmental seals. One document captured his attention. Operation Purification. Vyra, he called, his voice strained. What is this? She glanced over, her expression growing somber. Files I was not meant to access. Morton has been formulating a substantial plan for months. I have been attempting to decipher its entirety. Jake scrolled through the document, his blood chilling. This extends beyond mere apprehension of a few troublesome extraterrestrials. This is the systematic expulsion of all non-Praxians, Vyra concluded, abandoning the communication console to join him. Commencing with humans. Morton believes your species represents the most significant peril to Praxian cultural integrity. There is only one of me, Jake stated, bewildered. Not any longer, Vyra replied, activating another file. An Earth vessel experienced a catastrophic descent in the northern wilderness 3 months prior. Morton's forces apprehended the survivors, 17 humans. They are being held at a clandestine facility beyond the capital. Jake stared at the grainy surveillance images depicting humans confined within detention cells. Why was this not reported to Earth authorities? Because Morton intends to exploit them, Vyra explained, her voice dropping. The file references controlled incidents to legitimize emergency mandates. He plans to orchestrate attacks by these humans against Praxian citizens. A notification illuminated on the communication panel. "It is my father," Vira announced, accepting the transmission. Thorin's visage appeared, his expression grave. "Vera. Jake. Are you secure?" "For the moment," Vira confirmed. "Father, we have located—" "I am aware of the humans," Thorin interrupted. "That is precisely why I'm contacting you. I attempted to reach my safe haven, but Morton's operatives were in waiting. I was compelled to retreat to an alternate refuge." Jake leaned closer to the display. "Where are you currently located?" "With associates," he stated cryptically. "However, I have sustained injuries." "Nothing critical," he added swiftly, observing their concern. "But I require time to recuperate before I can relocate." "We must liberate those humans," Jake insisted. "If Morton utilizes them for his fabricated operation—" "It is already in progress," Thorin interjected. "According to my intelligence, Morton intends to initiate a staged assault tomorrow night on the central marketplace, attributing it to human terrorists." Vira's 4 eyes widened in alarm. "That would instigate widespread panic. The public would demand decisive action against all off-worlders." "Precisely," Thorin nodded. "And Morton would possess the justification he requires for Operation Purification." Jake paced the room, his mind racing. "We require definitive proof of his scheme. Something tangible we can present to the Planetary Council." "The detention facility," Vira declared suddenly. "If we can document the humans being held there, and procure records of Morton's directives—" "It would be heavily fortified," Thorin cautioned. "And Vira, if you are apprehended, my career would be the least of our concerns," she concluded grimly. Following an exchange of details and potential strategies, they concluded the transmission with a commitment to rendezvous the subsequent evening. As the screen went dark, the apartment lapsed into silence, punctuated only by the distant sounds of the metropolis below. Jake turned to observe Vira watching him, her expression unreadable. "You are not obligated to undertake this," he said softly. "This is not your personal conflict." "Is it not?" she countered, drawing nearer. "Morton's xenophobia threatens everything I hold dear. Everything my father imparted to me before political discord estranged us. And what is that? That strength derives from diversity. That isolation fosters stagnation." Her voice softened. "That frequently, the most valuable perspectives emerge from those who are most dissimilar to ourselves." The space separating them seemed to thrum with palpable energy. Jake was acutely aware of her proximity, of the subtle fragrance that was uniquely hers. "Why did you genuinely assist me?" he inquired, his voice low. "A deputy minister jeopardizing everything for a human bartender defies logic." Vira's 4 eyes scrutinized him intently. "I have dedicated years to academic study of humans, your history, your cultures, your biology. However, encountering you—" She hesitated, then reached up to trace his face with slender fingers. "Theory is a poor substitute for direct experience." Jake's breath hitched at her touch. "Am I merely an experience?" "You are a revelation," she whispered, her fingers following the contours of his jaw. "Humans experience everything with such profound intensity. You live with such uninhibited abandon, such fervent passion. It is simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating." Jake captured her hand in his thumb brushing across her palm. "Praxians do not experience passion. We govern it, contain it, channel it into appropriate avenues." Her voice had acquired a breathless quality, but you embrace it? The tension between them was palpable, a living entity demanding acknowledgement. Jake found himself leaning closer, drawn by forces that transcended rational thought. "This is imprudent," Vira murmured, even as her free hand settled against his chest, sensing the rapid rhythm of his heart. "Likely," Jake agreed, his fingers gently tilting her chin upward. "But wisdom seems rather inconsequential at this precise moment." Their lips met tentatively at first, then with escalating urgency. Jake was surprised by the warmth of her mouth, the softness of her skin against his. What commenced as exploration rapidly evolved into something more primal, more desperate, as though they both sought to bridge the vast chasm between their species through physical contact alone. They moved towards her bedroom without conscious intent. Articles of clothing were shed along the way. In the dim illumination, Jake marveled at the subtle distinctions in their anatomies, the faint luminescence of her lavender skin, the graceful curves of her form. Yet these differences only amplified the wonder of their connection. What ensued was a discovery of novel sensations, of unexpected harmonies between human and Praxian physiology. Their union transcended the purely carnal, becoming something that felt almost transcendent, a defiance of the very prejudices that threatened to fracture their worlds. Afterward, they lay entwined in the darkness, the city lights casting shifting patterns across the ceiling. Jake traced languid designs along Vyra's arm, still astounded by the silken texture of her skin. "That was," Vyra began, then chuckled softly. "I lack adequate vocabulary." "I believe that is a universal sentiment," Jake smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Indeed. Some experiences elude verbal expression." She propped herself up on one elbow, her demeanor suddenly serious. "Tomorrow will be fraught with peril. If we are apprehended, Jake, then we shall not be apprehended." He silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. "Such human self-assurance," she teased, though her eyes remained troubled. "Jake, should anything befall me, promise you will still endeavor to thwart Morton. Those humans in confinement, they require your assistance." "Nothing shall befall you," he insisted, drawing her closer. "We shall secure the evidence, expose Morton's scheme, and liberate the prisoners together." Vyra settled against his chest, her breathing gradually subsiding as exhaustion overtook her. Jake, however, remained awake, gazing at the ceiling, his mind teeming with strategies and contingency plans. Tomorrow, they were to infiltrate a high-security detention facility, driven by the slender hope of uncovering evidence to halt a xenophobic conspiracy. And should they falter, he would forfeit not only his sanctuary on this alien world, but also this unexpected bond he had discovered with Vyra, a connection that had somehow become more significant to him than he could have ever imagined possible. The detention facility loomed against the pre-dawn sky like a fortress shrouded in shadow, its perimeter starkly illuminated by harsh spotlights that swept across the desolate grounds. Jake and Vyra remained crouched behind a maintenance shed, meticulously observing the patrol patterns of the guards in their distinctive purple and black armor. "The security is even more stringent than anticipated," Vyra whispered, adjusting the stolen official uniform she wore. The helmet concealed her features, though it was slightly too large for her slender frame. "Morton must be accelerating his timetable?" Jake nodded, feeling a degree of discomfort in his own borrowed uniform. "Is your access code still functional?" "It should be. Deputy ministers retain level 3 clearance for all facilities." She paused. "However, if Morton has already flagged me as a dissenter, then we shall improvise," Jake finished, his hand drifting towards the stunner he had retrieved from Vyra's personal security cache. "That is what humans excel at." Her four eyes crinkled in what Jake now recognized as her unique expression of amusement. "Your confidence is either your species' greatest asset or its most perilous delusion." "Likely both," he admitted, briefly squeezing her hand. "Ready?" They approached the side entrance with practiced nonchalance. Vyra's pilfered credentials granted them passage into the outer perimeter. The initial 2 checkpoints were navigated with minimal suspicion. They appeared as nothing more than a pair of official officers reporting for duty. It was at the 3rd checkpoint that events took a turn for the worse. "Credentials," demanded a senior officer, his mask tilted suspiciously as he scrutinized Vyra's identification. "This clearance was flagged an hour ago. Security protocol necessitates verification." Jake tensed, his hand subtly moving towards his concealed stunner, but Vyra stepped forward. "Override Alpha 7 Tango," she stated with unwavering confidence. "Direct authorization from Security Chief Morton for the inspection of the human prisoners." The officer hesitated, clearly perplexed. "I will need to confirm." "Confirm it, then," Vyra snapped with imperious authority, effectively explaining to the chief why his surprise inspection had been pre-announced. The bluff proved successful. The officer stepped aside, muttering apologies as they proceeded into the detention block. "Impressive," Jake murmured as they hastened down a sterile corridor. "I have endured sufficient of Morton's intimidation tactics to emulate them," Vira replied grimly. "The human detention cells should be located in Block D, according to the files." They rounded a corner and froze. Ahead, a contingent of official officers surrounded a prisoner being escorted between cell blocks. A prisoner whose battered military armor and dignified demeanor were unmistakable, despite his evident injuries. "Father," Vira whispered instinctively, stepping forward before Jake grasped her arm. "We cannot simply rush in," he cautioned. "We require a diversion." As if in response to his words, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor as an automated voice announced, "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel report to designated stations." The officers escorting Thoran exchanged confused glances. One barked into his communicator, then gestured to his companions. "Take the prisoner to interrogation. We will deal with him once this is contained." As they marched the general away, Jake and Vira exchanged glances. "That was not us," Jake stated. "Someone else is here." "The distraction we needed," Vira replied. "You follow my father. I will locate the human prisoners and the evidence." Jake shook his head firmly. "We stick together. I'm not leaving you alone in here." "Jake," she said softly, touching his face through the helmet's opening. "Trust me. I can handle myself, and those humans require someone of their own kind at this moment." Before he could protest further, she pressed something into his hand, a small data crystal. "If we become separated, this contains everything we have discovered regarding Morton's plan. Deliver it to the Planetary Council." Their eyes met in a moment of silent communication that transcended words. Then Vira was gone, moving swiftly down a side corridor toward Block D. Jake followed the officers escorting Thorin. Maintaining a discreet distance, they led the general to an isolated section marked Special Interrogation, where 2 guards remained posted outside while the others departed to address the security alert. Approaching the guards with practiced authority, Jake announced, "Relief detail. Chief Morton requires all available personnel to respond to the breach." One guard shifted uncertainly. "We have orders to remain with the prisoner." "New orders," Jake insisted, gesturing impatiently. "Either comply and I will send them, or remain here and explain to Morton why you disregarded a direct command." The guards exchanged knowing glances before reluctantly departing, leaving Jake in solitary confinement outside the interrogation chamber. He lingered until their retreating forms vanished around the bend, then promptly entered. Thorin was bound to a chair at the room's core, his head hanging low. As Jake approached, Thorin lifted his gaze, his eyes widening in recognition when Jake removed his helmet. "Morgan," he rasped, his voice strained from what was evidently harsh treatment. "You shouldn't be here." "Seems to be a recurring theme in our entanglement," Jake retorted swiftly, already working on the restraints. "Vira's here as well, securing the human captives." Thorin's countenance darkened. "It's a stratagem. Morton anticipated your arrival. He's been disseminating intel to Vira, awaiting her initiative." Jake's circulation chilled. "We must apprise her." Before they could react, the portal slid open. Security Commander Morton himself stood silhouetted in the entryway, flanked by Agent Krell and 4 armed enforcers. Unlike the masked security personnel, Morton wore no headgear, exposing sharp Praxian features contorted into a grimace of chilling triumph. "The human tavern keeper," Morton declared, his tone dripping with self-satisfaction. "How utterly predictable. Humans invariably return for their own kin, do they not? Much like creatures retrieving their young." Jake straightened, positioning himself protectively between Morton and the still weakened Thorin. "Where is Vira?" "Deputy Minister Vors is presently confronting the repercussions of sedition," Morton replied nonchalantly. "Fear not. You shall be reunited presently in a cell, preceding your public demise." "The Planetary Council will never sanction this," Thorin growled, struggling to stand. Morton chuckled. "The Council will laud me when human insurgents launch an assault on the central marketplace this very evening. Attacks orchestrated by the very prisoners your progeny endeavors to liberate." He gestured to his guards. "Seize them both." What transpired next unfolded with a seamless alacrity born only of extensive combat conditioning. Jake dropped to one knee, unfurling his stunner and discharging it in a singular fluid motion. The initial guard succumbed, followed swiftly by the second. Thorin, despite his injuries, launched himself at Krell with astonishing vigor, grappling him to the floor. Morton retreated, drawing his own weapon, but Jake was quicker. His stun blast struck the security chief squarely in the thorax, propelling him against the wall. "Humans," Jake stated, surveying Morton's inert form, "are brimming with unforeseen capabilities." Alarms continued to shriek as they disarmed and apprehended the fallen guards. "We must locate Vyra," Jake urged, assisting Thorin towards the exit. "No," Thanane countered resolutely. "You must reach the command center. If Morton's assertions regarding tonight's assault hold truth, the evidence will reside there, along with the means to thwart it." "I refuse to abandon either of you," Jake protested. Thorin grasped his arm with surprising fortitude. "This predicament transcends our personal involvement, Jake. Vyra grasped that when she entrusted you with that data crystal. Honor her conviction." Torn between allegiance and affection, Jake finally acquiesced. "The control center. Where?" 2 levels north, the northern quadrant. "Proceed. I shall locate my daughter." They parted ways in the corridor, Jake accelerating towards the facility's central nexus while Thanane advanced with unwavering resolve towards Sector D. The cacophony of alarms masked Jake's progression as the majority of personnel were preoccupied with the initial intrusion, the origins of which remained a mystery to him. The control center was remarkably undefended upon his arrival, its staff apparently diverted by the escalating emergency. Jake swiftly interfaced with the primary terminal, initiating the download of all documentation pertaining to Operation Purification and the clandestine false flag operation. The evidence was damning. Detailed blueprints for deploying mind-controlled human captives as instruments of war, complete with Morton's official authorization codes. As he worked, the portal slid open behind him. Jake whirled around, weapon raised, then froze in utter disbelief. 17 humans stood in the entryway, led by Vra and Thorin. The liberated captives, both men and women clad in tattered Earth Defense Force uniforms, regarded Jake with equal astonishment. "You're human," one woman declared, stepping forward. "An actual free human on this forsaken sphere. Captain Diana Christensen," she introduced herself. "These are my crew. We experienced a catastrophic landing 3 months ago during a routine reconnaissance mission. We've been guests of Chief Morton ever since." Jake holstered his weapon, a grin spreading across his face despite the imminent peril. "Jake Morgan, tavern keeper, and evidently part of an impromptu rescue initiative." Vyra moved to his side, her helmet discarded, her countenance flushed with exertion and exultation. "We must depart immediately. I've initiated the facility's emergency evacuation sequence, but its duration is limited. I have secured everything necessary," Jake confirmed, presenting the data crystal now laden with irrefutable proof, sufficient to dismantle Morton and his entire enterprise. They navigated the now pandemonium-stricken facility with haste, their passage unimpeded by security personnel, too engrossed in the apparent system malfunction to challenge their movements. Outdoors, they commandeered 2 transport vehicles and sped towards the capital. "The Planetary Council is convened in an emergency session," Thorin explained during the drive. "Morton persuaded them to grant him extraordinary authority this evening. We have less than 2 hours to present our findings." Jake stole a glance at Vera beside him, her expression resolute despite her evident fatigue. "You risked everything," he murmured softly. "For my planet," she replied. "And for you." Her hand found his on the console between them. "Some things are unequivocally worth the hazard." The council chambers were in utter disarray upon their arrival, Morton's staunch advocates vociferously championing immediate action against the purported human menace. Their entrance, a disheveled general, a discomposed deputy minister, a human tavern proprietor, and 17 Earth Defense Force personnel, elicited an immediate and profound silence. What ensued was a reckoning. The evidence was meticulously presented, testimonies were given, and Morton's insidious plot was unveiled in its entirety, revealing its starkly xenophobic underpinnings. The council's initial shock morphed into indignant outrage, culminating in resolute determination. By nightfall, Morton and his co-conspirators were apprehended. The false flag operation was meticulously dismantled, and an urgent communique was dispatched to Earth authorities regarding the recovered crew. 3 days later, Jake stood amidst the wreckage of the rusty anchor, surveying the devastation with a discerning gaze. Reconstruction would demand considerable time, but the Council's generous restitution package and official apology would adequately offset the expenditures. Already planning the grand reopening? Vira inquired, stepping through the fractured doorway. She was now attired in civilian clothing, her government uniform replaced by a simple tunic and trousers that, to Jake's eyes, only enhanced her allure. Contemplating something more expansive, in fact, he replied, drawing her into his embrace. The Council's newly established Interspecies Relations Committee requires a base of operations, a location that is both comfortable and offers exceptional cuisine and superior beverages, a place where all species can feel truly welcome. And they have appointed a human tavern keeper as chairman. She chuckled, her arms encircling his neck. The very same human who precipitated an interplanetary incident by providing sustenance to a famished elderly alien. The same human who succumbed to affection for that elderly alien's daughter, Jake added softly, his lips finding hers in a kiss that continued to feel like a profound miracle of biological compatibility and deep-seated emotion. As they parted, Thorin stood in the doorway, appearing more robust than Jake had ever witnessed. "The Earth delegation arrives tomorrow," he announced. "Captain Christensen's report has evidently generated considerable upheaval. They are contemplating the establishment of a permanent human embassy on Prax 9. Jake grinned. "I suppose I won't be the sole human in the vicinity any longer." "You will forever remain the first," Vira affirmed, her eyes alight with unspoken promise. "The one who illuminated for us the true essence of humanity." Outside, the sun was descending upon Prax 9, casting elongated shadows across a metropolis irrevocably transformed by a single, unassuming act of compassion on a frigid evening when a human male establishment proprietor discreetly offered a meal to an elderly humanoid extraterrestrial, never anticipating the profound trajectory that single act of sustenance would initiate.